Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Dheeraj has shared several numbers, and we have some fantastic folks coming at the problem from different angles. Kalpana, you've seen what happens when women have access to finance, not just in India, but other geographies as well. Sairi, when virtual communities were not even a thing, Shiro's was massive. So who can say more about what you've done keeping women in the center? And the proof of the pudding, of course, Kaleidofin, the kind of work that you've done taking finance to women, bringing them at par is really, really phenomenal. Over the next hour, so we have about 60 minutes available to us. I do have a couple of questions for each of you. And of course, we will open the floor for questions, maybe the last 10, 15 minutes or so. We don't need to problematize the situation. We already know about the gender gap that persists. We also know about the outcome, what happens when a woman has access to finance. There is enough data, some of our own, and a lot published out there. We have some researchers in the room who've done this work to say what happens when a woman gets access to a bank account. The household spends more on nutritious food. When a woman has access to, even uses a digital payment product, the household spends more on the education of the girl child. So there's enough proof of the outcomes that will follow with access to finance, particularly for women. But we are here, and I'm seeing a mix of fintechs and researchers and product designers in the room. So I don't think we need to go in the direction of inspiration or inspiring people to build for women. I suppose the fact that we've self-selected ourselves to be here, you're inspired to build for women or catalyze for them. What I do want to ask the three of you is to focus on the hows, focus on the actionables to some extent, and loosely speaking, hacks, if you may have, that fintechs here could take back and sort of quickly fold into their products. Saria, maybe I want to start with you. How are, and you've not after, but along with Shiro's now getting into finance, how are you approaching delivering finance or taking finance to women? And I'm asking this to you because you've been looking at this customer and multiple customer segments and their behaviors. So what is the approach that you're taking?
Thank you for that, Supriya, and thank you for having me here. Wonderful to be in this group of people. I think a little bit of how we got to Mahila Mini is a little bit of my own career journey. 99, when internet practically didn't exist, so we have an internal inside joke among some of us who we call ourselves children of Indian internet because we started building the same year when some of these things started taking place. But the way I see this is, at a very broad level, what are we trying to do? I think we're trying to use internet to connect women to the process of GDP creation. So everything that we do sort of is economic mainstreaming. So earlier we did it by creating safe space, creating employment, entrepreneurial opportunities, support along the way. And I guess it was fine for the time and space we were in. And even when I think of Shiro's, we started a little early. We started in 2013 when the number of women online was still less than 10 million. And of course we're a beneficiary of, 500 million women coming online, over a period of time where we are. And then of course COVID accelerated a little bit of not only digital adoption, but also payment adoption. So a little bit of what we are doing today is the same thing. So we're adding, earlier it was employment, entrepreneurship, we're adding capital to the mix. And capital is a bigger catalyst, So we are saying, hey, there are 400 million women who want to be connected to the economic mainstream. They don't call this economic mainstream. They say, "Main kuch karna chahti hu." And that means they have a phone, they have a UPI, they have an Instagram. They've learned that there's a Meesho, there's an Urban Club, there's a Zomato, there is YouTube pe kuch kar sakte hain, Instagram pe kuch bech sakte hain. So all that has happened. And what we're really saying is we're probably building in the post-microfinance world, right? So this person is aspirational. You can also call it consumerization of finance, right? So she doesn't think of herself as a subject, right? She's a person who wants to use cool apps and make money and spend it on, some online platforms or whatever she wants to do with it, you know. But she's highly aspirational. She wants to use a good product. And so Mahila Money is really opening access to capital without making it hard, So what do we really do? We take all the women we have served over years, women looking for work from home, women looking to do small entrepreneurial ventures, women even looking to build ventures that might scale up. And we are saying, hey, now can we sort of make it easy for you to find funds to grow, working capital, productive capital. So it's not BNPL today because we think the largest need is opening this trigger, and then other products get added onto it, embedded insurance, savings maybe. And Shiro's got to 25 million women, and we still sort of didn't have the confidence to open this door until COVID happened. Like it was in our mind, we were doing testing with HDFC to say, can we launch a credit card? Can we do something else? And then I think COVID accentuated two things. One, India is a country of entrepreneurs now. This whole job aspiration is slowly like going away. It's still there, but a lot of women know they may never get to a corporate job, and that connects back to the labor force participation. But consumerization of internet is what we are sort of building upon. See, अब उसे पता है that internet है, पहले YouTube के लिए है, फिर cooking videos के लिए है, फिर कुछ सीखने के लिए है, and then other things sort of go from there. And that's how we're able to do this at scale now. So we're doing nothing new. Microfinance did it for so many decades. We're just saying, can we reach you faster, and can we create an experience that you appreciate as a consumer? And hopefully rinse and repeat it for many times, and hopefully it'll become a thing.
It's fascinating, Sairi. Vipul, and that also brings me to your target customer group. And when I say that, I'm only thinking of women at the moment. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but this group is not a digital native. Many of them may not have direct access to internet. So then what have been, let's say, some insights, some areas of intervention that you've tried to bake in when you want to service the women customer groups as Kaleidofin?
Thank you, Supriya. Uh, Good morning to all, and a pleasure to be here. So coming to your question straight, I think our customers, household and the women, are not digitally native. I think about 20-25% have today started to use smartphone with some access to financial services, but a majority still are not. And that is a barrier in itself, because when you start to think about anything fintech, you obviously expect that there is some tech property present using which you can now start to create a UI, UX, and an experience. And this was something which we knew when we decided to serve this customer segment, not something that we sort of discovered later. And right from the beginning, we realized that, especially in finance, I think even people like us today, even though we have access to internet and smartphones and everything else, and all the portals, all the comparison engines, we still sometimes and many times want to speak to somebody, want to meet somebody, and then perhaps go on taking the decision, right? And that's where we thought that pure tech in financial services may not be the right way to start, because you would start by excluding a good 80% of the customer base that we are actually trying to serve. And that made us believe that we have to figure out ways to create channels and what we call as networks, which are now tapping into these customer segments, already have a pipe to the women customer, in some sense serving them in some ways or capacity. Could be a financial product, could be literacy, could be other products that they're trying to sell or offer, or even things like digital literacy, financial literacy, and see how do we create an experience through a tech and touch model, leveraging this network partnerships. These are large network partners I'm talking about. MFIs are a common example, many community partners, many last mile connects which have been created today in the rural, semi-urban areas. So we created a tech platform that can now onboard these community partners easily and give them the right properties, the right agent app, the right languages that they sort of, the agents also need to use, because agents also belong to the same community, largely. A lot of them are women. I won't say majority are women. The agents today, majority are still men, but they belong to the same community. They go to that community, they talk to that customer almost day in, day out. So that's where we started. We started to think about creating networks that have some touch point with the customer, evaluating the strength of the network in terms of how deeply are they connected. Do they visit the customer once in a week? Do they visit the customer once in a fortnight? Because even repeat messaging helps in financial services. And then we always decided that even from day one, we will still have a customer app in multiple languages. The UI UX that sort of connects to the sort of rural customer point of view, UI UX that connects to women in particular, the imagery that is needed to sort of connect. And there we found what we consider our secret sauce is an approach we call as goals. Goals is where people no longer think about finance or financial products, but actually think about end use. And you were speaking about it in some way, Sairi, just now, that the end use is in some sense, which is very intuitive to people. So goals could be, for a women customer, the primary goals that we hear is actually across. It's not just very personal or just family oriented. They're thinking about their business. They typically have a small occupation, small business already. They're thinking about obviously the children and their education, and that is important. They're thinking about educating the girl child, which again, as you go about in different parts of the country, you will see different focus. But almost every woman is trying to make sure that the daughter in the house is also going to the school. They're thinking about, if they're slightly older and we come across customers from different life stages, they're thinking about how do they, while they would have lived their life in hardship, what can they do in the last 20, 30 years of their life that they have an emergency fund to tap into, and they've seen so many of these. So goals became our approach, and we gave them the imagery to pick their goals very easily. So for example, if education is the goal, daughter's education, you pick that, you click a picture of your daughter, you put it right up in front of you. You know how much you want to save. If this is sort of higher education, then you're trying to save a few lakh of rupees. And that's how you get started. And then you're able to see that all points of time. Every time the agent is coming, even if you don't have a smartphone, the agent is turning the phone and showing you parts of information which we can speak about, that this is where you've reached. And that sort of started to give us that, I would say, edge to how we went about. That removing the point of finance to bringing in real life goals and using the channels and the networks to then start building on the customer journey.
Well, so what I hear, and at least this may be massive abstraction, but what I hear both of you talk about is reach her where she's at. If she's on a digital platform, you reach her there because she's already consuming information. If she's not, then you reach her in through ways that where, I mean, these ways you can find her from where she's at, and there isn't too much that you need her to do to be able to access this. Kalpana, I wanted to take both of what Sairi and Vipul's submissions to you and ask you if you've also seen some case studies, some examples from India or, thank you so much, other geographies as well. Some things that, and there are fintechs in the room, that they could take back as insights, some things that they can build on top of.
Thank you, Supriya, and lovely to be with Sari and of course, old friend Vipul. Morning to everyone. Yeah, this is an interesting topic, and while we all agree that we need to be gender intentional, and if you're not, then we literally are not addressing the women. And we face this quite frequently with the work that we do. A lot of our work in India has also been with public sector banks, right? And with other players, private players. And they take pride in being gender neutral. And so one needs to actually sit with them and explain, why you need to be gender intentional. And in that, our Women's World Banking around the world, we have what's called a women-centered product design. That we've developed over the years, and it's been finessed. Are we fully there? Probably, but I still feel that there's no stopping to the learning. And the design principle is fairly simple. I mean, and it's the core of the women-centered product design, and we work with fintechs around the world, is also that, yes, of course, you need to design a product that is, that is important from an inclusion point of view for the woman, but it has to make business sense, for the financial service provider that we are working with. But because if that is not kept in mind, it would just be a side activity. So a lot of the work that we do actually is not with the CSR and any of that. We actually work with business teams, because that's when financial inclusion for women becomes a reality. Otherwise, it just becomes just a side project. Ye bhi kar diya, tick mark ho gaya, right? I mean, no, but it needs to make business sense for them. So that is that narrow intersection. So in terms of actually the way we do the women-centered product design, we work with the financial service provider, and it's a 5-stage process. There's like a design, diagnose, define, diagnose, and design. And each of these stages are important. And a lot of it, you realize, is actually very iterative, because you can't just go with one solution, and you need to keep testing, what's working and what's not working. But the real work actually happens in the pilot stage. And we do a lot of the work at the ground level with the financial service providers. We, the recent work that, I'll give an example of a public sector bank and with a fintech that we recently worked. In both these cases, one was a savings-led approach, and the other one was to solve, because they had a low percentage of women in their book. The stated problem was, how can we have more women? It was about 8%. In the case of a savings bank led approach for the public sector bank, and we're working with 3 such banks right now. So massive reach is not an issue now. Everybody's got an account and all of that. But when you actually see the transactions that's happening, the balances are very low. She's just like, it's just coming and going out. The work, and we had done earlier some work with DBBL, our partner in Bangladesh as well, for their wallet called Rocket. And again, it was led through remittances, et cetera, but the money would come and then would just go out. We had to understand, like, why is it, and I just, in the case of a public sector bank, she just felt, the diagnosis was, banks are for big people. My 500 rupees has no meaning here. When I walk into a branch, I'm not feeling welcome. These are some of the issues. While the stated, which is why gender intentionality is so critical. And so we followed a 3-step process there, and three-pronged approach there. It was just what we called a Jandan Plus product that was created with a savings with an OD at the end of it, so that it makes there's like an incentive for her to save. But equally, welcoming communication, the sensitization at the branch or the BC point, and we of course understand the importance of the last mile connectivity. I mean, banking correspondents play such an important role, and we have less than 10% of them women, right? So one is sensitization of the male BCs, but equally, can we have more women BCs? I mean, they're great relationship managers, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually started working with the BC correspondents as well. So these were the 3, like channel, product, and the communication. All 3 formed an integral part of the design solution. In the case of a DBBL, when we were doing the, I was sharing with you this morning as well, we figured that, these women are given the app, they're asked to, and they were withdrawing the money. And when we actually went into the problem in terms of why is it that they're actually withdrawing, we understood that they were actually only taught how to withdraw. So when they're onboarded, aap idhar jao, ye press karo, paisa aa jayega. That's it. This is all that they are taught. So obviously, could you blame them for not knowing the other benefits? Because what she would do is to withdraw this money and actually go to the cash center to actually send money home. All this was possible in just the same app. But this is not even something that she was aware of. So, to be sensitive to the kind of, the journey, the customer journey that the woman has to follow when she is onboarded, et cetera. And this is the same thing that we found with the fintech player that we were working with, which was an MSME lender as well, which was that, we first checked whether we do some interesting work around the globe to check for algorithmic bias, and we did this work, very interesting work, which we got as a grant. And, so this heavy data crunching that happened, and we were all very happy because at the end of the day, there was no algorithmic bias as far as women were concerned. because the logic was the data was 90% male, so therefore, the data in itself would be a problem. These were some of the, assumptions that we went in with, but actually it turned out to be that there was no actual bias, when it came to the lending. So then why did the portfolio have less than 8% women? And then you realize that it's the top of the funnel issue. There weren't enough women applicants. And even when the women applicants did come in, there were issues and drop-offs and even the servicing. She was terrified of even asking a question, because the service center, the gender sensitization even in the service center. So when we're talking about hybrid model, it's not just enough to have the hybrid model. It's also equally important to do the sensitization at these touch points, whatever is a touch point that, one is looking at as a fintech or as an FSP. So, these are some of the things that we need to be hypercritical of, which is the women-centered, from a women-centered design perspective. Equally is the improvement of course, the gender, in servicing these women customers. And this is a pet topic for us. And we all know the shocking statistics, even in a 95% customer base of MFI has less than 13% women employees. I mean, that's like the shocking statistic. I mean, and then the whole, stereotyping around, women can't do collection, we know about all those biases. Right, so I think the minute we are aware of the problem, I think we'll start taking action. But I think that awareness is something that we're all playing a role, and I think that's something that is ongoing. Yeah.
Fascinating, Kalpana. You've thrown open so many threads. I'm sure we can go on for a couple of hours picking on each one of them, but I'll be mindful of time. One point that I definitely wanted both your comments on. We've spoken briefly, and both of you have hinted on product design. And designing it depending completely linked to the needs of the customer. But I also want you to comment on experience design, because what we are also hearing Kalpana talk about is this massive lack of confidence. This is not a person who believes that the formal finance is meant for her. She feels out of place. And therefore, if a huge part of her continued usage is going to be how she feels accessing this, are there elements in experience design that you're working on?
Absolutely. And to be honest, I have to tell you, this is something that I think as a founder, I have a little bit of this existential question all the time. See, what is it that we're doing? And sometimes my mother says, "आप लोग क्या काम करते हो?" So हम महिलाओं से बातें करते हैं. Like, and that pretty much sums up, I think, how we treat everything. So some, rewinding this to some cultural context. So one is, I think as a society, we're more unforgiving of women's mistakes. So I think risk avoidance is built into the psyche. To say, like, even if, even if you get raped, it's your problem. You caused it, right? So it's so inbuilt. So even if you look at how women treat money, risk avoidance is built into the, it's in our genomes now. So one is that. Two, just cultural context. Like, if I'm a woman, I'm talking to a guy on the phone, it's a problem, so small things that sort of taught us. And so therefore most women will invest in something they can trust for a long period of time. Microfinance did this really well, right? So that weekly meeting with Chai and repayments was not just weekly meeting, it was a support group, it was a hangout, it was a source of business. In some ways, we're taking all of these insights and productizing it. So let's say the Mahila Money experience. So first of all, today every fintech will say, no human intervention required. No, you can go through the whole app without ever coming across a human experience. And we say the other way around. So, for example, our customer support is actually a video call. आप देखो आप किससे बात कर रहे हो, and the person you're talking to is a woman. So, one small cultural embedment. Anywhere we're engaging with women will be on the job. So आपको कोई आदमी phone नहीं करेगा, कोई आदमी आपके घर नहीं आएगा. I think it's a big win. It's a big cultural win because it says that these people care about, how I look to my family. And I think amongst defending different sort of barriers, women also have to defend their own decisions to their families a lot, especially money decisions, risk decisions. So this is part of that. Second, the community experience. So for example, if you log into the Mahila Money app, you're a user, every afternoon at 12 o'clock, you can call it a virtual Mandli. There is a loan open house, which means our team is sitting there, our underwriters also listening in, and the 50 women in the room who are saying, "Madam, मेरा loan pass नहीं हुआ." अरे आपका तो पहला loan है, आप छोटा loan apply कीजिए. मैडम आपने मेरा लोन पास नहीं किया, अरे आपके पेपर्स तो पूरे नहीं हैं, आप दोबारा कीजिए. So there's a little bit of this community openness happening, which is what the SSG did a lot. And then small things. We, for example, have a small process called pre-disbursal counseling. It's literally to say, बहन आप पैसा ले रहे हो, काम के लिए ले रहे हो, आपको पता है इसको कैसे यूज़ करना है, डू यू नीड एनी हेल्प, आपको जीएसटी के बारे में पता है, आपको कैनवा के बारे में पता है, आपको इन्वेंट्री के बारे में पता है, आप कौन सी मशीन खरीदोगे. एंड देन ऑफ कोर्स सम हेल्प. फॉर एग्जांपल 70% of our loans go to 3 categories: beauty, fashion, and food. So we've got like the manufacturers in the back to say, hey, like, you know, इनको अच्छा machine देना, थोड़ा discount भी दे देना. So it's a little bit of trust building along the way in this exercise that says, मैंने इनसे एक लोन लिया पर मैं और भी कुछ कर सकती हूँ. They will hear me out and not ending at the transaction. I think thinking of this as a very long-term relationship with trust at every level, you know, built in. And I think we are seeing that's really like the, so we're not designing anything new. The loan is the loan. Every financial product is governed by, you know, how RBI wants it. You can do a little bit of innovation here and there. And a lot of these learnings are actually, they've played out. They've played out in Amul, and they've played out in SSGs, and they've played out in microfinance. We're just digitizing that entire narrative in a little app to say, hey, can I do more? Can I, you know, and of course, taking it further. So for example, it's not just that, there's also content to say, आज हम GST की बात करेंगे. So there's a 1-hour GST workshop happening for people trying to figure it out, to say मेरे को नहीं आता. And there's a feedback loop. So what we hear from women goes back into the product, goes back into the design. And again, I think a lot of this is just saying, you can trust us. You're safe here, and we want you to win. And I think that gets reinforced in many ways in how we sort of both build tech and product, but also how we engage with the user.
Thanks, Ari. Vipul.
Thank you. So I think I'm just going to take on from where Sairi left, and something which Kalpana was saying earlier. A lot of our learning actually comes in the smaller pilots that we do. And right from the sort of the beginning, which is about 4.5, 5 years ago now, we realized that we were trying to offer savings to low-income customers, women in particular. And savings is something that at least us as let's say the bankers or the experts in finance believe that there is no money to be saved. I was there in the other room just now, and one gentleman commented about a similar thing on what is the need for a 123 UPI. Zarurat bhi hai kya? Shayad there is no money to be managed there is no money to save. So of course, we had different ideas because we had done some deep surveys, and we knew how informal economy, informal financial services actually thrive on many instruments, including savings. And we thought that, okay, what can we learn? One way is to simply write off that, okay, informal is very expensive, there's too much fraud in it, which is also true. But what are the good things that actually customers, women customers in particular, can embrace? And we realized that first and foremost, I think when you start to think about saving, formal institutions think about saving as, okay, consider it to lock the money in for a few years, few months, because that's how the saving will build. And you spoke about it, a slightly different point on the similar thing, that people often, from the opposite end, when you try to now address savings, at one level you believe that people want to withdraw, therefore you want to create a product which is going to lock the money, right? But the lock is a trust barrier. If you start to say that, okay, your money will be locked in for 3 years, people have experienced in the rural world as well, women customers in particular, NPS Swawalamban happened 7, 8, 10 years back, and people really sort of lost trust because the monies were locked for a very long period. And while they could have got it back with some interest, but the liquidity need was there. So we learned that you have to give instant liquidity. Even if it's a 5-year goal, which the woman customer is choosing to save for her daughter's education, she might be 10 or 11 years, and by the time she's 16, she's trying to save something for her. You still need to give liquidity at any point in time. And we started with that. And to our sort of amusement, what we realized is that a lot of people actually saved money, withdrew in 1 month, came back 2 months later, and then saved for 4 years. Right? And that gave us the confidence that perhaps we are on the right path, that Just build trust by showing flexibility and let people realize that this will actually give them returns if they want to sort of keep it for longer. But at the same time, your monies are not locked in. So this was around the sort of the point of start where we said that a lot of flexibility. You withdraw the money if you want it tomorrow, next month, whenever. Anything can happen in your life while you've thought about daughter's education. An emergency came, you could withdraw the money. The other point we thought about was that when long-term redemptions happen, and now this is the time when capital is getting built. This could be 30, 40, 50,000 rupees over a period of time. People are taking it out at the end of 3 years. What we noticed, again at the pilot stage, when we were talking to customers, that a lot of women customers were giving a family member's bank account detail for the redemption, right? This was again like 5 years ago, so various reasons, bank account had become dormant of the woman customer. The woman customer's bank account did not have an ATM card, whereas the man in the house had an ATM card. Various reasons, right? But for a little bit, we said that let's stick to it. Let's not give this flexibility. The woman is making the choice. The customer is woman customer here. She's choosing ABC reason to save. Let's make it mandatory in our own processes that we will have to have the women customer give us their own bank detail. In fact, go ahead and open a new bank account and assist them. At that point, we did not have a bank account opening journey. Today we have in our product stack, but we informally manage. We tied up with local BCs to get that going, right? To get new bank account open. And that became a big success. Today, as we see, 95% of our women customers are savers. Actually, 95% of our savers are women customers, right? So it's the other way around. So, and that's beautiful because what we are seeing is, and this is not small money. These are values worth 10 to 40,000 rupees. Each individual person's folio value is that much now. So that was one thing. On the other side, on the credit side, because we believe financial instruments are neutral. There is no sort of thing about saving is better than credit, and it's all about time management of money over time, right? So, so we thought that, okay, microfinance is just a phenomenal job, is perhaps at least reaching to the largest number of women customers in our country, elsewhere in the emerging market. And we were already building a credit model called chi-score, whose objective was to identify creditworthiness, which typically from conventional credit models get written off. That, okay, too much volatility, bad customer, poor score, written off. But the problem with credit scoring, what we noticed was that this was again designed for formal customer segment with a very sort of visible cash flow. Salary is coming in, income is coming in. So a 7-day blip in my credit card payment, I should get penalized. 70, 80, 100 points from my scorecard can get diminished. But the same cannot hold true for the informal sector customer, the women customer, which we were sort of tapping through the microfinance channel. So we created a credit model that could actually look at these anomalies, that a 7-10 day delay in a given cyclical fashion is actually not qualifying that customer to be bad, because in the medium term, even at 90-day or a 180-day period, the customer is coming good. And it's only the peak is 7-day delay during some times. So that helped us identify women customers to now figure out that while microfinance is giving 30, 40, 50,000 rupee loan, these customers have taken loan for 10 years and have actually gone ahead and set up a small enterprise. Could be dairy, could be a beauty parlor, could be different shops and other establishments. And today need a much higher credit, actually a credit worthy as well. But neither the microfinance company nor the banks who are working as a BC in a BC model were in a comfortable situation to give that kind of credit. So we brought in the credit model, we brought in the whole stack for credit and started to find customers who could actually be given a 1.5 lakh rupee loan, a women customer owning an enterprise. So this is the backstory, by the way, right? So all boring stuff. Now let me tell you the learning that happened. So the learning was that we were going about bringing in customers, both women focused way in certain geographies working through microfinance partners. And in other geographies, we had neutral partners in the sense that whoever is the customer, bring on board. And what we realized that in the geography where we were serving the woman as the primary customer, let's say 100 customers got loan and 80% of those cases, women was the primary loanee. And there could have been a co-applicant or whatever. And in other scenario, there were, it was somewhat the opposite. 30% were only women and 70% were men. What we found over a sort of a longitudinal survey that we are still into, it's a 24-month survey along with our knowledge partners. Wherever the women were the primary applicant, their role in that enterprise was major. So as in, they were not just stopping at taking the loan and passing it on to the husband or somebody else. So the data was very astonishing. 80% women were primary applicant. In those households, 60% women were the controlling members of the business, right? And the opposite was none, where let's say so it's still not 80 to 80 or 80 to 90, but it was still making sense. And that's what sort of informed our product design, that how do we now make it consciously available to women customers, I'm just giving one example of 1.5 lakh, but it could be any ticket, as long as you're credit worthy. How do we make it available? And let's see how does it change the dynamic in the household in terms of the authority, in terms of the agency that the woman has in the, so yeah, learnings for us, it was unconscious when we started, but I think we realized that there are small learnings that come through these, what we can sometimes consider trivial product design elements that are trivial. In fact, still today, the large financial houses actually tell us that, okay, what's so great about this? And then we have to explain, this is how it spanned out, better credit, more ticket, and so on. But yeah, interesting for us.
Thanks. So what I hear, at least both of you talk about, is in all the initiatives or experiments that you've done, there was either a subconscious or a intentional attempt to put the control back in her hands. That you decide what do you want to do, how do you want to access the service, the product, and so on. I'm going to change tracks a little and ask the same question to the three of you, especially because you're really the torchbearers, you're thought leaders when it comes to this space. Outside of the product, outside of the experience with the product, we definitely struggle with bias. And Kalpana, you hinted, you spoke about algorithmic bias, but I'm sure bias exists, and we know that bias exists even outside. So bias against women. And the second point is almost this othering of women as a group. We see that happening. There's enough, at least I know of anecdotal evidence, some of it observed as well. But that's the reality of this customer segment. That's the reality of the market right now. Outside of the product, when you are advising companies, when you're consulting with them, when you are designing companies, your own companies, are there things that you're doing, that you are nudging others to do, to be able to address both, which is bias against women and the othering of them as customers? We start with you, Kalpana.
Yeah, I mean, these are very genuine issues, of course. We have a very definitive tool, for actually figuring out if there is a bias. We have a bias scorecard for fintechs, which we've developed. It's a simple scorecard, but then that helps you, become aware of some of these issues. But sometimes, I don't have the intention that's almost always stated. But the fact is there is. And so how do you actually bring it out? And so the scorecard is a useful tool to kind of identify, where you stand. I mean, there's like a 10-point scale, and then you figure out where you stand in that scale. So there's a tool. The tool can only take you that far, and then what do you do with it? And, and so therefore the whole gender sensitization bit, as I was telling you. We also have an investee arm. It's a small fund, but we do investments in women-led and women-focused institutions around the world. And as one of the core deliverables in our investee companies is also to see the bias, sensitization within and without. So when we're talking about employees, the number of employees, do we have enough? And yeah, we have a good percentage of, but what are the kind of roles are they in? Are they in every? Because you find women more in the top management, and you find them right at the bottom. You find a lot missing in the middle. So you need to you need to peel the onion a little bit more, and then hold the mirror and say that, are you grooming these women to take on positions? So we call this a GAM, gender assessment methodology, that we follow in all our investee companies. So that's another tool that we use to kind of hold the mirror in terms of the biases, that not just about role, but the types of role, number of women and the types of role. To the second point about othering, I think that's like the basis of our women-centric design. You've got to make the women-centered product, and the solution that you are offering has to make business sense. And it's not just it's not just another objective of including women. So that's core to what we do. And so, I mean, that's something that we bring right out at the open and say that, you know, this has to make business sense. And a lot of times, you know, the fact is that, you know, we try something in the pilot, it's working very well, and we've dropped the idea. Simply because, you know, the FSP could not make the, you know, could not actually arrive at a business, and that's okay. But it's got to be front and center. So for one of our partners, we actually developed, and again, just like people mentioned, we are completely, you know, product agnostic, because we believe resilience can come from all of them, right? I mean, savings, credit, insurance, any of pension, any of that. And in this particular partnership, we actually came up with a you know, hospital cash kind of a product for women. It was no business sense. You know, it just didn't make business sense. We had to drop it. Right? So that's okay too. But point is, you need to keep that business sense in the front and center, right? And in all of this, of course, the digital financial capability, and this is something I know that this is not part of what you asked me, but I still want to mention it, because so distinctly different from digital literacy and financial literacy, and often gets confused. You know, but digital financial capability is something that we draw attention to when we work with any of these organizations. And what do we mean by that capability is, like, how does she overcome the behavioral? How do we nudge? How do we give her a strong CTA, a call to action, which will like Vipul was mentioning, right? If, you know, can you do 100 rupees saving next month? I mean, this is very strong. That's part of the product design. And so this is how you need to nudge as well, like, you know, and show the business. When you have to justify the business opportunity, you need to work on all these elements. You can't just, I mean, I have a great product and, you know, it's going to work. No. Is the ecosystem ready? Is my agent channel ready? Is my customer ready? And you need to work on both sides. And so the digital financial capability of the customer then plays a very critical role. And, you know, it's not just knowledge, it's not just skills, but equally attitudes, right? I mean, so with how is she approaching? You know, is she, like what Sairi was mentioning, you know, I mean, she feels comfortable that it's a woman at the other end of the video who's talking to you, etc. But equally, is this organization something that I can trust, right? So it's also about building the capabilities and making the ecosystem ready. You know, bias can be unearthed, business case can be made, but unless the ecosystem is not ready, it's not going to make business sense at all. So it's got to be a combination of all three, yeah.
I know, I love the question, because I think having worked with women now for over a decade, I think a lot of, for example, partners that we start conversations with, and to them, I think building for women typically means a pinkification or whatever it is. You just dip it in another color and, you know, we can serve it. So I think we've come from that, and it's gotten better. But a lot of this is, one, the fundamental value system, into the lives of our user. I mean, there's a reason why women are risk averse, because most of them don't come from either income or inheritance. I mean, men start lives with inheritance, and it's kind of built in, you know, in your confidence game, and it goes from there. So I think a lot of this othering of women in design problems, or even like the same बैंक एक्सपीरियंस फॉर एग्जांपल, मैडम जब मैं बैंक जाती हूँ तो मुझे कहते हैं अपने हस्बैंड को लेके आओ, तो you know, like it's the same thing, or that one common phone number, one common bank account in the family, because it's kind of, it's the power dynamic in the family that says, hey, you know, this man matters more than you do, woman. So, you know, it's, and the same values get carried over, right? They get carried over in how outside world treats you, in how, you know, and of course, the other thing that we constantly realize is that to this woman, her worldview is very different from the worldview of somebody sitting in a financial hub and designing a product or thinking about it. I mean, insurance is a classic case. Like, I think, you know, I think borrowing has still gone a little closer home, but insurance hasn't yet sort of made inroads because the context is so missing. Matlab, agar main bimar ho jaungi, to what will I do? Is how she sees the world, or the fact that to her, it's just being able to make some money, have an income, have a little, you know, nest egg, and make sure her children sort of, you know, get to where she wants them to get to. A lot of this is missing in all our all our conversations, like literally at a ground level, how do we how do we bake in more empathy for the lives women have? And different women have different lives, but at a very broad level, you really are, even at, let's say, my level, for somebody who's been in the corporate world for 20 years, a bank manager at HDFC, while giving you a loan, will still say अपने husband को लेके आओ साइन करने के लिए. आप अकेले लोन क्यों ले रहे हो, अपने हस्बैंड के साथ लोन लो. Right? So othering is baked in right through to say, you know, like, we know how this stacks up, and we are going to make sure we display it back to you. So it, and this is what we're reinforcing every single day in so many messages, in so many sort of ways, and that's what's causing this, you know, like, hey, you stand aside, and therefore women only have worked really well. I think India is a classic case study where women only spaces have done really, really well, you know, because they removed this little circle of bias to say, यहाँ पे आप हो, आप जैसे भी हो, आप जो भी पहनते हो, जो भी खाते हो, जैसे भी बोलते हो, however little your ambition is. I think a lot of this is also, you know, आप तो कम बचाते हो, आप छोटी इंश्योरेंस खरीदोगे, आप छोटा लोन लोगे. I think it'll sort of plays back, and if you're not judged upon your choices, all sorts of choices, right, from dressing up to, you know, whether you speak good English or not, or whether you run an unbranded business. Like in my head, the classic case is Sridevi in English for English. When she's in the Indian society, she's really invisible. You know, she's, you know, you can see her in a little invisible chamber. But when she goes abroad and she calls back, यहाँ पे मुझे entrepreneur बुलाते हैं because I run a laddu business, right? And I think this is a very common sort of thread for a lot of women.
Looks like I might have the last word. Perhaps no. I mean, you're going to come after me. But let me start by saying that I would actually say that the bias is the opposite. The credit in women customers is so much more better, and I can back it up by our data and some of the players that we work with. It performs better. I already spoke about more women, much more women are savers. So it's no longer, at least to us, it's no longer the fact that it makes business sense to create business to serve women, right? And it's super clear. In fact, we do the opposite side. If a man is a borrower, woman has to be a co-borrower. It's mandatory today in our loans, right? Up to a certain ticket, 2 lakh rupees, which is where we believe women will all, they are participating equally. So woman has to be a co-borrower. So I think, I mean, to your question, I think it's the basics, right? I think you have to think about your product design accurately. You have to think about the imagery accurately. You have to appeal to the customer, the women customer, in a language and comfort on the person who's speaking. If they give them the comfort, then it sort of comes through. So the basics are all there, but I think the detail is in the, I mean, everything is in the detail now, each of these aspects. Now, I'm sure all of us in this sector, including ourselves, we thought that, okay, we are doing what is needed. We've checked all the boxes. But as we sort of went about getting into the detail of the imagery, okay, why does this imagery does not make sense? We realized that, okay, perhaps the goals, the picture that we're using for goals need not be impersonal. We need to bring in personal aspect to clicking the picture of the, like I was saying, of the child, of the daughter, and that becoming the picture instead of animation being there in some sense. So it's about all of these nuances that we sort of decided upon ourselves that let's keep iterating. We are on a path. We may not be successful yet. And let's see that, okay, if I found, another thing is that, see, we can find what we want to find. Like if I want to conclude that there are no good channels to reach women customers, I will actually find that result. Because, I mean, I'm sure most of you agree with me, right? And we have actually chosen to find the opposite, that how do I find channels, how do I find the right UI, UX that will work for my women customers. And I may not be successful on day one. Even today, I have more channels that are more friendly to men, primarily because men agents. And in fact, one of our products, which is a dream product, which has not yet succeeded, we believe is the crux is this. It's a maternity management program. Maternal mortality is a problem everywhere in the world, all emerging countries, so much more in India. So it was a saving plus credit plus insurance pack focused on maternity management. Hasn't succeeded. None of you would have heard about it because it's not out there. We tried pilots and it hasn't, primarily because this channel through which we are going, we've not found the right channel. In some pockets, women have been able to do it, women agents. but they were so small that we couldn't sort of bring it to scale and bring it to success. But we are at it, right? And therefore, just trying to sort of say that, okay, what are you trying to find out there? Be clear about that. That's what we found for ourselves. And be committed. Take an iterative approach. It won't succeed on day one. We haven't in many areas. And yeah, I think better future in store for most of us.
Great. Thanks, Vipul. We have a little less than 10 minutes. We do want to open the floor for questions from the audience, if any. Munami.
Hello, my name is Monami, and I head the research at D91 Labs. Some of you might know we had conducted a study where we interviewed Mahila Mani and Shiro's, a woman, and to understand the financial lives of women across tier 1, 2, 3, and beyond cities. I had a very specific product-related question, or a more of an ideation question. So a lot of our responses that we got, one of the questions were, do you have a credit card, or would you like to have one? And the answer, at least I would say, 90% of the women were like, no, we don't have one, and we're not interested in getting one. There is an entire perception of the money that's not mine, I don't want to use or depend on that. Which also keeps them from a credit line. So in terms of emergency, they have to ask their husbands or dip into some other kind of, money they've kept at home or whatever their own medium is. But I don't think anyone's thinking about this problem with a, focus on how do we solve this, apart from the fact that giving them a line of credit, which is a different objective altogether. Just wanted to open the floor and ask all of you, because we have practitioners, people, all three of you, how do we solve for this entire factor that only 12% of India, 12% of credit card holders in India are women?
Let me start. We are thinking about it. Exact same point. And by the end of this month, we'll start rolling out the first few cards. And then credit lines will kick in tied into the card in the next 6 months as things sort of pan out. But I think, see, you've asked the right question, that there is a lot of bias in how people perceive, women as well as men, perceive financial products and credit, while people like movement of money across time, right? It's nothing bad. But credit card is a bad word. It is expected to sort of drive consumerism. It is expected to sort of make you fall into a debt trap, right? But, and I'm pretty certain that most of us who manage credit cards, we have an auto payment. If we were not on the auto payment, we will be missing our timelines. Or cred helps us today, right? Remind us in many ways. So we have to think, so this was our problem, right? We had the monies to pay our bills on time, but we were not disciplined, or we did not have the right scheduler to run these. So AutoPay did it, NAC does it, and Cred is helping us do that today. We have to actually ask that question from that customer's context. See, they take credit line from money lenders today. And hi. And we've looked at your study, deep studies around if a household has 100 rupee of credit book, 50% is informal credit. And that credit is coming at an exorbitant rate. It's actually equal to a credit card, except that you don't need a card for it, right? So what we are trying to do with what we are launching right now is an on-tap credit. It's a line that rotates. You can swipe it. It's not a credit card. It's a debit card, but it works like a credit card. Regulations, so I'll keep that aside. We would love to come up with a pure credit card, but it will give a credit card-like experience to the women customers. No regulators, I hope, in this room who will come after us. But it's all legal. And essentially, the way it will work is that it will start with a small line, and then based on how you're using the line, we will keep enhancing the line. And here, the question that we're asking is opposite. Like in savings, what we also realize a subsection of customers were not savers. Like net balances were not growing, but huge throughput, which was great. Because even for us, people like us know, I know I'm going to take all the time, but just last one sentence, like whoever understands treasury, money lying in a bank account is the worst way to manage your money, right? All of us actually manage our personal finance better than that. So why should we expect the customer to sort of think of? So we are trying to increase the throughput of money. Earn, pay, and make your payments. Don't keep it idle, and invest, and save, and borrow, and all of that. So yeah, baby steps, but some green shoots.
Just two things here. I think we've been thinking about this a lot. One, I think as incomes increase, this confidence will change. Today, I think just the fact that most people are super restricted, credit is scary, even for people who are well-to-do, credit cards as a, it does come with a little bit of cultural subtext to say, आप अपनी चादर से बाहर जा रहे हो, right? You're overextending yourself, and Indians hate that. So they'd rather go to the guy where the credit, even though it's more expensive in an informal setting, you know, at least it's managed. आपको पता है कितना टका लिया, कितना देना है, कब देना है. It's much more sort of visible, and it does come with a little bit of lavishness attached to it, which, you know, Indians are pretty value conscious about that. But I do think as more women go up the income brackets and have their own assets, this will change. I do think the challenge we have at hand is very, very fundamental. How do we get more women to get closer to economic mainstream?
I think it's a very valid point, what we speak, and we see this in research after research, which we do with our FSPs. And I think one nuance that I think we need to be mindful of is not clubbing all the women as just one homogeneous group. In all the work that we do, you know, we find women, you know, there are risk takers even in that very small segment. And so when we develop the persona, even the communications and the solutions that we actually offer is quite different, you know, between these. So I think, you know, the fintechs have the massive advantage of having the data available with them. The gender disaggregated data exists with them. Can we go a level deeper and not just keep it at a portfolio level, but maybe look at the transactional detail and then actually see what's the preferred mode, channel, communication? I think we need to have a nuanced approach in dealing with these women segment. That would be my one input when it comes to, you know, the offering, whatever be the offering, and in this particular case, credit card. Yeah, I'm conscious of the time. Time's up. Is in all bold and red. So,
if you permit, we can take one more question. If you permit, one.
Hi, I'm Raghavendra. I'm a data scientist. So, in the past, we have seen that banks used to have a lot of money, and fintech companies used to have technology with them. Now the scenario has been completely changed. Fintech companies has got a lot of money, and the banks has got a lot of technology. Can we foresee the same scenario when compared with that of decentralized applications panning out to India as such? That's a Web3 based application. Yes, yes. DAOs.
I'm not an expert at it, so can't comment much. But yeah, I mean, firstly, don't agree that monies have shifted from banks to fintechs, and tech has shifted from fintech to the. But yeah, I mean, not an expert on the topic. There's a session going on the other room.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Suraj, founder of Prajahita Foundation. We work on person with disability, and so that's the area which we focus on. So I just want to ask the audience, we work with women with disabilities by providing microcredit to start their enterprise. And after taking 6 to 8 months, and when we go to the PSCs, public sector banks, or any cooperative society, so it's more about manager-driven loan providing system rather than the policy in place. So how to solve this challenge? Because we find women with disability is finding it's very difficult to access credit compared to other community. Yeah.
maybe I can just take a shot at it and give it to you. We've done some work in Indonesia for women with disability. You're right. I mean, there could be any number of policies. So we worked at 2 levels. We work at both the policy and the advisory, the ground level work. Policy was surprisingly easier to, the minister was supportive and the policy was put in place. But the real challenge actually was at the ground level implementation. The only answer I have is that at least with our experience in Indonesia, it takes time. And unless you again show the business case, you show the sensitive, you need to be a little patient with, and our work with the public sector bank especially is that we work at 3 levels. The senior management is always bought in. The middle management, which is the financial inclusion team, very gung-ho. Of course, I need to bring in the gender element. But the real struggle is at the branch. He's got 85 deliverables. This is the 86th, right? So he really does not have the mind space to kind of accommodate and kya scheme tha, and how to get it in. So what we do is actually, if we find partners that can actually, like yourselves, right, who can actually work with the branch manager and see them as partners who help them in the journey, we find that that's an easier push, because you need to help him rather than, tell him to do, right? That seems to be the only way that, at least when we've worked with 3 large public sector banks, and that's been our experience. So patience and actual visible way in which you help and participate in that ecosystem, that's the only, it's not an easy answer, and probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but, well, that is the answer that we have from our experience, yeah? Yeah. Right. Yeah, it is. I mean, getting credit out, and that too for this, like, I mean, literally the bottom of the pole, right? I mean, women, and that too disabled women, is like literally the bottom of the pyramid. But the fact is that even sometimes we realize that they are not aware of the specific schemes under which they are eligible for. As I said, they are snowed under. Yesterday day before we were with a public sector bank, and we were just sitting in the reception. I'm not kidding you. There were 100 and odd products that was flashing on my, I was just in the visitors cabin, I mean, whatever. And the screen was showing. That's the level of complexity. I mean, that's a fact. He himself is not even aware of half the schemes, right? So, people like yourselves can play a very important role in just actually going, with the specific product scheme, sitting with them and explaining, this is what he or she is eligible for, this is what is going to, help, etc. Unfortunately, that is the way working with public sector bank is right now, and I'm sorry, but that's the only answer I have to offer.
Not an expert, but just 2 things. One is, I think, going with what Kalpana said, I agree. A lot of these cases will get lost in the mainstream just for want of attention. Look, you're working in a very specific use case, and I would say focused communities is perhaps one way to mobilize more support for yourself, but also bring a lot more intentional capital, intentional partners to it, like how you want to do this. There are a lot of people who may want to do this and may have either funds or intention or other communities that could contribute to this. But I would say just a lot more focus from the consumer needs, because it otherwise will get lost just because it's a corner case to a mainstream institution.
Not really, but would love to connect offline to understand it a little more and what can we do ourselves. Yeah, thank you.
All right, on that note, we are way beyond time. Thank you so much for joining in. We hope you enjoyed the day. Thank you so much, folks.